Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Wondergoal, the soccer betting podcast from the Action Network. My name is Michael Leboff. Joining me, as always, is BJ Cunningham and Sam Ingram from Betting Expert. And gentlemen, we welcome Sam back from his annual leave. You didn't miss much, Sam. We were all over Everton again, and you can imagine how that went. We were very right about the under in Arsenal and City. And we also nailed Brentford, giving Tottenham all sorts of trouble. So a really banner week for us while you were away. And we'll try to keep the momentum rolling here for another match week in the Premier League. 10 matches to sort through. We'll start with City and Newcastle. This one in Newcastle at St. James Park, 7:30 a.m. kickoff here in the States. Newcastle sitting plus 400 and beyond in some spots. City travels as a minus 165 favorite. The draw is plus 350. The big homework to do here is the Rodri situation with City. Obviously makes a huge difference. The record with him is something that a lot of soccer fans like to point to. That stat, it's pretty crazy. I think Newcastle's worth a bet here, Sam. I think this is a pretty tough matchup for City. It's been the fixtures are starting to pile up. They went to played in Europe, that 0-0 against Inter, then the crazy game against Arsenal. Now they have another tough one a week later against Newcastle, and of course the injury situation. Newcastle didn't really look all that great against Fulham, but I still think this team, especially at home, is dangerous, especially at this number.
Yeah, I don't disagree. What I would say is that the result against Fulham on the weekend, I think it had been coming for Newcastle. I said a couple of weeks ago that they've been riding their luck a little bit. I don't think they've been that good all season. Isak was not fully fit at the Cottage. Wilson, obviously, too. So that doesn't help. And I think Fulham deserved the win in the end. More shots, better chances, accumulated more expected goals, more clinical, brighter in possession when it mattered. I think they're a team to look out for at home, as are Newcastle, as you mentioned. Obviously, they were on the road last weekend. And yeah, touching on Rodri, I suppose we do need to be mindful about it when approaching this. And if you fold that into the fact that, yes, they were in the Champions League in midweek. Yes, we have just had an international break. Now they're losing key players. This is a spot for Man City, which looks a little bit awkward. Newcastle very good at home. So the thing is for me, Michael, like after the types of games like we saw Arsenal versus City, after not everything went City's way, I always kind of like to get behind them in the following game, because City with a point to prove, like that's an animal you really don't want to get into a cage with. But like you said, for all the reasons mentioned, yeah, I'm not so keen to take them on, especially at the prices. They are, what are they? They
Minus
are
165.
short to get the win here. So I would be leaning towards Newcastle, but just from like what I said, just from what I've seen from them so far this season, I'm not overly keen to take them on. But saying that, you would expect Newcastle to score at home, and if they do so, then that +1 Asian handicap will look really good. But for me, I'm probably just going to sit this one out.
Yeah, I think that Newcastle is the side here. Now, here's the thing. I know people didn't like what Arsenal did in the second half against City. That's going to be the norm going forward of what people are going to do to Manchester City, because it's very clear that Pep has no interest of overloading wide areas. He only wants to play through the middle. And so what do you have to do? You have to play very compact to be able to stop City. So, Newcastle gave City some problems last season when they played at St. James Park. And the biggest thing that I think Newcastle has over a lot of the teams that have already played City is they're a really dangerous transition team. Probably one of the most dangerous in the Premier League. When City is committing so many guys forward, if you've watched their matches, especially the match against West Ham, there were constant situations where there's 2v2 or 3v3s going back in transition. And if you go back, both of Newcastle's goals that they scored against City were on transition breaks where Ishak or Gordon got in 1v1s against Kyle Walker. So I think the biggest thing is, obviously, since Rodri's not there, that limits the amount of control that City can have. But I think the bigger loss, if he's not going to play, is Kevin De Bruyne. Because if you remember that match last season, he came on in like the 60th minute and he torched Newcastle because he is really the only guy who can play balls over the top and create against these really compact low blocks. You saw that against Arsenal without him. I mean, City was just passing the ball back and forth up top. Their center backs took 13 shots. Like, that's just going to become the norm. And even if you watch them in the EFL Cup, I know they had played a completely rotated squad, but Watford sat in the most compact 5-3-2 I've ever seen. And they just kept passing the ball around and just taking shots from outside the box. So I'm not so sure City can break down these type of low defensive structures without Kevin De Bruyne available. The tricky part here is, like, when do you buy the price on Newcastle, right? Because we don't know the status for De Bruyne right now. He's, I think, listed as doubtful at maybe questionable at best. City opened at -175. Now they're down to -165. Now that Rodri's out, I have a really hard time believing they're going to get back to -175, even if De Bruyne comes back in. So for me, I like Newcastle +1. They've obviously been amazing at St. James Park since the start of the 2022-23 season. They have a +1.23 expected goal differential per 90 minutes. So I think this is a good spot on Newcastle. Like, I have City projected at -137, assuming they were fully healthy. So you take about 10 to 15 to 20 cents off for Rodri. I think you're getting a price closer to -120 on City of where it should be.
There's always one match, I think, on a slate, and this goes across like any sport, that I say this quite a bit. Like, if you were to ask me to make a bet here, I just feel like no matter which option I pick, we'll end up losing, and that's how I feel about the next one we're going to talk about. Sunday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern, between United and Spurs. United's +125 at Old Trafford. Spurs +180. The draw is +290. Tottenham with a really compelling, strong performance against Brentford, and that came on the heels of what was a good showing against Arsenal in a 1-0 loss as well. Like, they played all right in that one. They were pretty good against Newcastle the week before that. You look at their schedule, and if you look at it kind of soberly, the Leicester draw looks ugly, but we talked about that game, right? They dominated, just couldn't finish. Absolutely smoked Everton, smoked Brentford, and then the two kind of tough losses against Arsenal and Newcastle. So I don't know if this team's results are painting a fair picture of them. I think they should probably be maybe a couple points higher in the standings. That said, I do also think that they have the profile of a team that can kind of just not make good or bear fruit on like good performances, and sometimes they just might throw up a dud. And now they're playing a team in United who, I mean, do you want to talk about a team that can drive someone up a wall? This is certainly one. A 0-0 against Palace over the weekend, which they were the better team. I don't know how that game stayed on 0-0. I'm really mad I wasn't a part of it. They got pantsed by Liverpool, comprehensively beat by Brighton, a good performance in the opener against Fulham, and the big win against Southampton too. So I feel like these teams are kind of just on level pegging, and both have obvious flaws and obvious strengths, and United's at home, so it makes sense for them to be the slight favorite here, or the favorite here. And I don't know. All that said, like, it's a recipe for me to just run far away from this game, BJ. I don't want any part of it.
I don't either. I think I don't even know what to make of this match. And I think this is one of those situations where, if you're somebody who bets, over, I understand there are people that just come in for the weekend and then, maybe they might pitter patter out. But if you're somebody who's betting the Premier League like week in and week out over a long period, this is a match where you're going to learn a lot about both teams, right? Because, United has been a better build-up team. They've been better out of possession. But I think the real question mark is what do they do out of possession in this match? Because it's pretty clear that the way to beat Tottenham is to sit deep and to not press them. And they're not going to be able to generate a lot of chances. And United has proven over a long period of time, or about the beginning of this season and even partly last season, that if they're at full strength, playing in a compact structure, they're actually pretty good. Where they suck is when they try to press teams. So I think that's the biggest question mark of what United does here. As far as Tottenham is concerned, Liverpool really gave United a lot of problems with their press, and sitting in that type of mid block. So I think Tottenham can cause problems and maybe generate some easy chances here and there. But it might be a good opportunity to live bet whoever just goes down, just betting the opposite side as well. That might be
Yeah.
an angle to play here. So for me, I'm passing. I have this projected right in line with the market. So I have zero interest in betting this match, but it will be a fun match to live bet, I think, because whoever goes down first is going to obviously crank the pressure up, crank the aggression up, and try to get back into the game. So, and both these defenses are very vulnerable and blow leads, routinely. So that's the way I would play it.
Sam, any interest in getting involved here? Are you joining us and just sprinting away from this one?
Yeah, kind of. I've got a bet here just if you want to have a bit of fun. It's kind of a same game parlay. I'll be honest, I hate all of the main markets here in what is a game involving two sides. I'm just not sure about in the minute from a betting perspective. 3.5 is the goal line, which is where I'd have it as a bookmaker. United slight favourites, but still not convinced how much I want to trust them, especially after they're going to host FC20 midweek, which might not be a walk in the park. FC20
right,
scored
Sam.
in 16 consecutive games, so that might be harder than it looks for them. Tottenham played Karabag on Thursday, so there's a lot of minutes going into the legs of these players. Again, we saw, as we spoke about, Rodri buckle in the Arsenal penalty area on the weekend after a busy summer, so it's really hard to know exactly where these teams will be at. I want to buy into this being a blockbuster, one for the ages, despite increased workloads. I really hope that's what we get. We know Tottenham's going to go for it. I hope United do too. Like BJ said, it's going to be interesting to see how they set up to kind of quell this Tottenham side. Both teams to score is at -278, which is criminal, but you compare that with over 3 cards in a same game parlay, and you can get to, which I think is -123. So short price, not much value there, but I would like to think we get goals, and I'd like to think we get cards as well. Chris Kavanagh's the ref. 3.77 cards per 90 average in all competitions last term. He's just given out 6 yellows in Arsenal versus Brighton at the end of August, and then 6 again in Wolves versus Newcastle in September. So if you want to bet to just kind of cheer along in a match which might descend into a little bit of chaos, then both teams score and over 3 cards at -123. But I'd say the value is very much not there.
That brings us to Arsenal and Leicester, two title rivals from about 8 years ago.
Right.
Arsenal is -575 at home. Leicester 13-1 on the road. The draw here is +750. Arsenal, of course, coming off of the 2-2 against City. I agree with you here, Sam. You were the one who jotted down this bet first. I don't know if there's a path to scoring here for Leicester, so backing Arsenal to win in a shutout or in some sort of alternate spread or something, I think is the way to go.
Yes, there is a path for Leicester to score here, and that's if a 16-year-old starts in goal for them at the weekend versus Leicester, like he's going to tonight against Bolton. There are rumours that David Raya may be injured, so what I would do here is I would just keep an eye on how Arsenal versus Bolton goes, have a look for team news, see who's going to set up for Arsenal on the weekend. If it's David Raya, Gabriel, Saliba and the rest of them, then this is very much on, I think. Probably do the same bet for Southampton next weekend as well. Leicester stumped up 0.5 XG after 80 minutes away in Warsaw last night, League 2 Warsaw. That kind of sums up what they're about in the final third right now. They won that game last night, needed penalties. They started Edouard, Decordova-Reid, Buonanotte and Fatawu across their front line, full strength. I just bring in Jordan Ayew in to chip in with goals in the Premier League. I'm just not having it. Odsonne Edouard wasn't Steve Cooper's first choice. I think they'd kind of identified a few players before him up top. And we spoke about Jamie Vardy already. Yeah, I'm covering old ground. I don't think Jamie Vardy's your man either. And despite scoring 6 goals in the Premier League, Leicester have only managed 3.99 XG in 5 Premier League games. Second worst to only Ipswich. And they've only recorded 1.0 XG or more in 2 out of 5 Premier League games. So when you come into the Emirates, when you're coming up against this Arsenal backline at home, it may be a bit of recency bias after what I saw them do in the second half against Man City. That is very much fresh in my mind, but I just don't know if that same kind of fortune or luck is going to follow Leicester to the Emirates. So if they continue posting less than 1.0 XG throughout a 90-minute period, then they may not find the net here. So win to nil at -120 for Arsenal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the same lines. I like under 3 at +105. So Arsenal has had the misfortune of playing down a man for some egregious calls twice now. But playing just 11v11 this season, they're only allowing 0.8 XG per 90 minutes. That's second best to only Liverpool. The defense is still incredible. Like there's, you can look at all the stats. A lot of them are wonky because they've played basically a full match down a man. But, Sam obviously already hit the nail on the head with Leicester's offense. As far as Arsenal's offense is concerned, I mean, they miss Odegaard a lot, and them selling Fabio Vieira and Emil Smith-Rowe in the summer has just proven to be maybe not the best strategy because they don't have anybody behind Odegaard that can create the way that he does, which means there's more pressure on Saka. He's getting doubled, and he can't do anything. Same thing with Martinelli on the left. Havertz, we know, is, he's fine in a system that has someone like Odegaard who can create, but just leaving him up top alone is not the best strategy. Listen, Steve Cooper's got his Leicester team in a really well-drilled 5-3-2 low block. I mean, the only concern here for Leicester, really, I mean, obviously there's some concerns for open play, but they just conceded a ton off of set pieces. And obviously Arsenal's one of the best. So that's the big concern. That's probably Arsenal's best path to actually scoring a goal. So for me, Arsenal's got PSG in the Champions League coming up. They're probably going to play the academy kids on Wednesday. You're going to be listening to this on Thursday, so we don't know. But I'll be interested to see what type of lineup they play. They're like you said, David Raya might not play. Although they brought in Neto, who's been a very good goalkeeper for Bournemouth, always positive post-shot XG plus-minus in his days on the South Coast. So I don't think there'll be a huge drop-off to him. But yeah, I don't know how Leicester's scoring here. But I have a little bit of concerns with the Arsenal's offense without Odegaard. Looks like he's going to be back October 15th. So Arsenal's probably going to struggle up until that point.
Okay. So not expecting too many goals in that one, or we're hoping for. The next one, Chelsea and Brighton. Chelsea's -140 at home, Brighton +330 on the road. The draw is +320. I know what I'm supposed to do in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking about this Chelsea team quite a bit. They've looked pretty impressive of late. They haven't lost since the opener to City. And it does look like Maresca has a decent kind of just handle on how to manage this squad. And then you have Brighton, who came out of the blocks gangbusters with the win over Everton, then the win against Man United, a good draw against Arsenal, and then they put up a 0-0 against Ipswich, which nobody saw coming, and then the 2-2 draw against a really feisty Forest team. And now they take on a Chelsea team, and I still don't know if the gap is as wide as these odds suggest between these two teams at this very moment. Like it might be just overall when we get to the end of the season. I do think if you flip the results from Brighton, they come out of the gates with those two draws and then they put together the wins, this number looks a lot shorter. I believe in them. I still think that they can cause a ruckus against the big six sides, etc. So I know I'm supposed to bet Brighton here, BJ. I think I'm going to get there. But this Chelsea team, I want to know. It's one of those situations. Are we going to find out? This is the match where we find out if what we're seeing is real.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that the best way to play this is to wait and see where the line moves, because I think that there is a good possibility that Chelsea could get north of -150, even to -160, and you can get a decent price on Brighton +1 by the time we reach match time. There's not too many concerning injuries. João Pedro is questionable for this one, but if you know anything about Brighton, I mean, they're the deepest attacking team in the Premier League, and there's really no debate about that. They have so many guys they can bring in and give the level of production over and over again. Because if João Pedro doesn't come in, well, then it's going to be probably like Evan Ferguson, or it's going to be a Dingra, or all those guys can still do it. One thing, so Brighton is playing very aggressively out of possession. They're playing a very high line, and they're doing a really good job at disrupting build-up play. And, Chelsea, the last few matches or so, they got hammered by Brighton's press, or excuse me, they got hammered by Bournemouth's press on the road. They played West Ham, and then they played Crystal Palace. West Ham is the worst defensive team in the league. Maybe Ipswich is, but Crystal Palace is playing incredibly passive as well. So this is like the second time they're going to face a good press, and the first time they faced it, they didn't do a good job. They stole a win at Bournemouth and created really nothing. Herzler will not be on the sidelines because he got a red card. I still don't understand why he got the red card in that match against Forest. That still is puzzling to me. I understand
few coaches missing this weekend.
Yeah,
right?
Nuno was yelling a lot, and I'm guessing some obscenities were being thrown at the ref. So I get that red card, but I didn't see Herzler say anything, and I don't understand why he was so upset. But that kind of concerns me a little bit with him being such a new coach and such a new system and everything like that. So that kind of part of it, makes me a little bit uneasy. But again, if we get to Brighton +1, I have to play that. Like I have Chelsea at -110 here. So yeah, I think this is a decent chance for Brighton, but I just need a better price.
Yeah, I would like Brighton +1. I think that'd be a good bet because I like goals here, and I think if Brighton can get on the score sheet, which I think they have in them, then that +1 will look pretty good. Chelsea are improving, like you mentioned, but that game last week, I'm not sure how much we can take from it from a Chelsea point of view, and that's no slight on them because you can only beat what's in front of you. But West Ham, really bad. We'll talk about them in the next game, but really, really bad. But yeah, now Chelsea -143 at home after a decent start to the season. Players coming into form. Nicholas Jackson is very much feeling himself. 5-0 in the Cup against League Two Barrow on Tuesday night. So the feeling's good in the Chelsea camp. Not something I would have really foreseen to this extent a couple of months ago. But like I said, I like goals. Many people will. Over 3.0 is the line at -120. It's okay. It doesn't really get me going. I think that's set about right. But elsewhere, Nicholas Jackson, with him finding his rhythm and the plethora of attacking talent behind him, +175 for Jackson, anytime scorer. I won't usually put anytime goal scorers up on this podcast, but I like that. Chelsea's leading striker. Don't think that's the worst bet you'll see this weekend. Only Erling Haaland has a higher XG this season than Nicholas Jackson's 3.28 XG from 13 shots. Haaland has taken exactly double the amount of shots Jackson has, amounted to 5.81 XG total. But obviously we're comparing him to one of the best strikers that has ever lived. But regardless, it's been a decent start for the Chelsea front man. He scored 14 in 31 starts last season. So I think it's a pretty good price for him to get on the score sheet this weekend.
Let's talk about West Ham. They're +225 on the road at Brentford. The Bees +120, and the draw is +260. I like Brentford here, but I also want to throw out there that West Ham is 23-1 to be relegated. I don't think that's a bad bet because the way that the defense has played has been it's been bad, not just this year, right? So it's not just Lopetegui coming in and not having like a handle on it. They were really bad last year. So this could be a more of like a situation where there's some serious rot than anything else. And the problem with them getting relegated is like the bottom of the league right now. There are 6 winless teams, right? Yeah. Leicester, Palace, Ipswich, Southampton, Everton, and Wolves. None of them have won a game yet, which I've never seen anything like that before, where we're this far into a season. We have 6 teams that have yet to win. You'd expect that Leicester, Ipswich, and Southampton especially will struggle. We might see another team kind of come down towards them, but with the way that like a team like Forest is trending, the way the teams like Fulham are trending, we're starting to maybe Brentford as well. Like these teams are starting to separate themselves from the pack, where I think we're looking at a pretty clear cohort of teams that that I think have a chance of going down. That being West Ham, Leicester. I'm not even going to put Palace in there. I do think that they correct themselves. Ipswich, Southampton, Everton, and Wolves. So out of that, now you're dealing with 6 teams, and I don't know if I trust West Ham to sort their defensive issues out well enough to get away from this pack. And that's really all you're asking for. So I think that they can outrun those odds at 23-1 to go down. I don't think that's a bad bet at all, Sam. I think we'll continue to bet against this West Ham team until they show us any signs of life. Like, it's just crazy.
At 23-1, I love it. The only thing is, if this continues, Lopetegui is gone, and he's gone very soon. So obviously that's what you need to consider when taking a relegation punt. But yeah, just
bring back David Moyes.
Yeah,
get him back. Get him back.
Call it Big Sam.
Give it Big Sam for the rest of the year.
Yep, call it Big Sam. He's been doing a lot of talking, so maybe he can back it up.
Maybe both of them.
Yeah.
A relegation super team.
Let me make it a trio. Bring Roy. Bring him
Tony
Roy
Pulis.
on the wheelchair.
We'll get Tony Pulis in there too. Just
three man coaching crew.
Bring them all in.
Before Saturday's game, West Ham had never lost their first 3 home games of a season. So both teams had changed their managers since their last meeting in May. So obviously now Lopetegui versus Maresca, and it took just 4 minutes for them to concede. Sancho got an assist, though Jackson did the heavy lifting. I don't know if you can remember the goal. Really poor goal to concede. There was so much space on the left for Chelsea to exploit, and Jackson just waltzed through. Rodriguez couldn't keep up with him. I think he was tasked like man to man Mark Jackson in the first half, which just didn't work. And it was just nowhere near quick enough to keep up with Jackson. It kind of reminded me of like when you were training, like in a training drill when you were like 8 years old, and the coach would step in for a minute or so and get on the ball and just keep people at arm's length. It was exactly like that. It was literally like men versus boys. It was nowhere near him. He just ran through and just put it through the keeper's legs. And this Jackson's second goal was almost as embarrassing as the first, actually, almost. Chelsea knocked it around like they were up against 11 mannequins. There was no real pressure on the ball. There were certainly no challenges of note, and 3 or 4 passes and they were through like a knife through butter. It was like West Ham weren't even on the pitch, and defensively for them, it's just, especially in that first half, very concerning. Straight after half time, quick Chelsea break, West Ham players jogging back, and I think Paqueta might have even slowed down to a halt when chasing Cole Palmer before the Chelsea man scored a third with what was a delightful finish. But yeah, Chelsea had 3-on-2 following a passage of play in Chelsea's defensive third. It took 3 passes, I think, and there was 3-on-2 in West Ham's box, in West Ham's half, sorry. It was just really poor. And if you turn up to Brentford like that, in the same shape, Brentford will do exactly the same to West Ham as Chelsea did if they arrive in similar fashion. West Ham also play on Wednesday night in the EFL Cup at Anfield, where they might get the runaround, which is not ideal. Lopetegui, you would say, needs positive results. He wants to win trophies like David Moyes before him, so he might be forced into play a lot of the big guns on Wednesday. And I feel like Brentford and West Ham are quite evenly matched, to be honest. I think they'll likely finish in the same ballpark if West Ham can sort their defensive issues out. If you like Brentford here like me, but you aren't totally convinced and would like a bit of security, then Brentford minus 0.25 with the draw on our side at minus 105 might be a way to go. I just think that Brentford get a bit of joy here against this West Ham defense, because it is looking really bad.
You know what it is? It's like you took David Moyes' low block and you just moved it 20 yards up the pitch. That's what they've done. They've just taken their low block to a high block, and they have the same amount of problems. The amount of space in the middle that Chelsea was able to just pass the ball through was like alarming. They're not providing it, like Sam said, they're not providing any ball pressure. So you're just kind of sitting in this high block. You're not really forcing turnovers. You're just kind of letting teams play through. And so since you're playing a high line, teams can just play off the back of you and create chances. Well, how does Brentford create a lot of their chances? A lot of those through balls in behind to Mbeumo. That's how he creates most of their chances come in transition. The one thing I'll say about Brentford, which is, I don't want to say concerning. In this match, it's not concerning, but when they play against good, like what they did against Tottenham, is Thomas Frank is trying to transition them to a team that controls matches, builds out of the back, presses high, all this, modern stuff, to raise the ceiling of them, which I get to a certain extent, right? Because if you play 3-5-2 low block, counterattacking football. Like, what's your peak on that, right? Finishing like 9th or 8th. So I know he wants to get them to the next level, and there's going to be some growing pains with that. That's not going to happen in this match because, like I said, West Ham's not going to apply any ball pressure. But be on the lookout for that for Brentford. They used to be when they played lesser teams like, West Ham, for example, where they'd play out of a 4-3-3 and they'd play more, build up, pressing and all this stuff. But when they played against the big boys, it was, 3-5-2 low block. They're not doing the 3-5-2 low block that much anymore, which is a little concerning. But again, good matchup from them here at home. Since Brentford got promoted to the Premier League, they've been really good at home. They have a plus 19 expected goal differential over the last 3 years. West Ham last season was minus 15 away from home. So great spot here for Brentford. I have them projected closer to even money. So I like them at plus 125.
Okay. And now we have to do it, unfortunately. Talk a little Everton. They are plus
first point on the board.
Yeah, we nailed that one.
Dang, they should have won that, Michael. Gosh.
Yeah.
And by the way, the market moved incredibly in favor of Leicester on Saturday morning. I mean, Leicester was getting close. They were close to even money. It was crazy.
Anyways, they another blown lead for the Toffees. Now they take on a Palace team that, like I said, I think has a lot more teeth than their record shows. I don't know if you want to say that about it. I don't know what you want to say about Everton. BJ and I are passing here because I'm not letting either one of us touch this game. But Sam, you got something for us on Everton and Palace, and it does look, the one silver lining for Everton, it does look like they are getting Jared Branthwaite back, and that should be pretty helpful since Michael Keane has played like Michael Keane to start the season, I should say.
Well, that is helpful. And another big positive, Michael Illimanen dies first Everton goal was taken brilliantly. He was a shining light for Everton at the weekend. Really impressed with him. Everton were the better team in the first half. It flipped round in the second, but the onus switched to Leicester to try and get back into the game. And that mixed with the general feeling around Everton, thanks to recent fixtures, that lightning would strike and they'd somehow concede. Saw Leicester then find the net with 20 to go, and then Everton had to hang on. So this was very much a game of two halves. But again, I think Everton might feel aggrieved that they've not won the game or put it to bed earlier on, better side for an hour or so. But yeah, Leicester stuck at it, got the goal they deserved. And Everton are playing well. Like I feel there is a game coming where they will blow away their opponents, but I'm not sure if it's Palace at home. So I'm not going to bet on them to win. But one price that stuck out to me was over 2.5 goals at minus 112. Everton have scored 5 in their last 3 games. They've conceded 14 in their opening 5 games, more than any other side, matching Wolves. Both Wolves and Everton boast the biggest expected goals against to goals conceded discrepancy in the Premier League. So Everton's 14 goals conceded from 9.02 expected goals against suggests they've been terribly unlucky, unfortunate. And that's likely why we can get a 2.5 goal line here with the bookies projections, having this under 3 goals, I'd imagine. But I don't know, it's Everton, isn't it? So that there's something deeper than expected goals in play here at present. This is Everton Football Club. It feels like, I don't know, the ball is kind of being sucked into their net whenever light appears at the end of the tunnel. And that's very much going to play on the minds of the players and the minds of the fans. And Goodison Park can get like when they're not too happy. And I wouldn't be surprised if the same happens again against the likes of Matete and Eze running out for a Palace side, who, by the way, are also looking for a spark, also looking for their first win. So I see both sides scoring. And once the first goes in, and I say it a lot, but once that first goal goes in, I think this could open up to be a pretty exciting encounter. So over 2.5 goals at minus 112. And hopefully, for Michael's sake, Everton can run out winners.
Do you see what's happening, Michael? We're starting to closely push him towards Everton.
He's getting there.
He's been resisting for 5 weeks now, but now we're on match week
on the other side. On the other side of the international.
Now
break.
He's like, maybe it's not such a bad idea to bet.
They're playing.
Maybe it's not.
They're playing well. Once I heard, honestly, it sent a shiver up my spine, Sam, when you said they're actually playing well. I'm like,
they really are.
He's in. I know.
They're just not for 90 minutes.
They're just
an issue in the Premier League. But
one thing I'll mention about the price here. Again, the market steamed heavily against Everton on Saturday morning. We've already seen Palace take a little bit of money here. So you could get Everton close to 2-1 by match time. So if that's the case, I will take Everton draw no bet and anything plus 105 or better. I will definitely do that. So just be on the lookout for the price here. Braithwaite back obviously makes things a little bit better.
Okay. Forest and Fulham.
Also,
next.
Everton is south of minus 200 now to stay up, which I love that as well. If you didn't get minus 250,
and they're 18-1 for a top half finish too, BJ. I mean,
know.
if we do think Sam, they're playing well.
Did we talk about the new ownership yet?
No, let's not even get in there.
But
maybe we've been down this path a million times.
Yeah,
it's just.
Yeah, well, I saw something that the whoever was prospective owner maybe wanted Jay-Z involved, which maybe is not the best thing to do at this current time.
That would be Jay-Z's 100th problem.
Yeah,
getting involved with Forest and Fulham next. Forest is plus 145. Fulham is plus 205. The draw is plus 225. I was very wrong about Fulham. Very impressive start to the year. And I think both of these teams are going about their business in a similar way. And I think it's the right way and a very pragmatic way when you're in their kind of class. And it's sad to say, but it's just the state of the Premier League now. Like if you're in that kind of, I would say like just above the relegation zone in terms of like your preseason projections, you do want to just, I don't want to say batten down the hatches because that's not giving these two teams enough credit, but you want to play a smart, pragmatic game, and that's what they're doing. They're doing it really well. Nuno won't be on the sidelines. I don't think that matters all that much. Morgan Gibbs-White, I believe, is also out, so that does matter here. But it's hard not to be impressed with both these teams. It's really, really solid defensively, top 5. I believe the two of them in expected goals allowed to start the year. And it's not like the schedules have been all that kind to either one of them. So I like the draw here. I think it's one where a 1-1 makes a lot of sense, and like a 0-0. The 0-0 is a little short. It's under 10-1 in the Premier League. I don't really want to do that, but that's where I'm looking here. I don't think either one of these teams is going to put the other one away, and the draw should be in play for all 90 minutes, Sam. So I'll take a draw here at the City Ground.
Yeah, I don't hate it. If you're looking at last weekend, Fulham outdoing Newcastle with relative ease at the end, 3-1 at the Cottage. Raul Jimenez opened the scoring. Looks like he might be nearing back to his best, maybe that we saw at Wolves. Maybe not, but yeah, a typical Raul Jimenez strike. I think he took it down on his chest, kind of close control, swiveled and just smashed it past Nick Pope. So great goal. I thought they looked really handy going forward, Fulham. Like they progress forwards with pace, which they have in abundance, commit bodies into the final third. They've got willing runners in Traore, Iwobi. Smith Rowe now wants to be involved in every attack. He's always on his toes, head on a swivel, clearly instructed to get forward and get on the ball as often as possible. And actually their right-hand side too, with Kenny Tete and Adama Traore, like that looks good. That's blossoming. Really like Tete. He'll get forward, wants the ball, willing to get up the pitch and help Traore. And I feel Traore probably needs that sometimes, like that option for an easy ball, rather than him being forced to be gung-ho, head down and rush things. His decision-making, obviously, that's probably an area of his game which he will always need to improve on. So Tete there helps. But yeah, I said it earlier, they deserve to win in the end. I just don't love Forest away for Fulham right now. A team that are improving, obviously, under new management, love playing at the City Ground. They're one of 4 unbeaten teams in the Premier League after 5 games, and they've played Liverpool, Brighton and Bournemouth. 3 sides we're all quite hot on right now. Team in form, a team to be wary of, but you're very much right, Michael. Morgan Gibbs-White is suspended, and that is a big miss. And by the way, I don't know if you can remember his tackle, and I'm just devastated that's lost from the game now. Like, he goes through the man, I know, but he wins the ball. And everyone you ask now will tell you that's a yellow card, and that's just devastating to me because I absolutely love people nailing the opposition, getting both man and ball. Man goes flying in the air, and ref waves play on. We're just never going to get that now. So
game's gone.
Game's gone. So that's unfortunate for our sport on a general level. But yeah, anyway, he's out. But saying that, it appears the likes of Elliot Anderson, Roman Sosa, I think it is, Jota Silva, they've just seamlessly slotted into this Forest side with minimal fuss. And after all the incomings and outgoings at Forest since promotion, I think that's a real positive to see that happening now. Players adding to the group on the pitch rather than adding headaches off it and adding to a bloated squad. So this is a little bit cowardly, but Forest on the 0.0 Asian handicap, draw no bet effectively, is -143. Very skinny. Probs the shortest price I've put up on this podcast. But I think there's still value there. And it could also work as a great Premier League parlay fodder if you're looking for a few selections to lump together. So I like that.
Don't worry about that price. Just wait till BJ starts throwing up, LaLiga.
No, don't worry.
Both teams to
I'll be
score
throwing up
no
some,
at -160s.
No, we'll get to -170. Some both teams to score no -175 in Spain. We'll get there eventually. I've done that before on this podcast and I got ridiculed, but the bet won, by the way. I think the price has gone a little too far here on Nottingham Forest. So before this match, and obviously a lot has happened since then. Fulham, house to Newcastle, and then Nottingham Forest loses Morgan Gibbs-White. But we've gone from +110 to +140 here. I'm not so sure that that's warranted. I'm not so sure Morgan Gibbs-White is worth 20 to 30 cents to the line. And the reason for that is because Nottingham Forest just spent big money on Elliot Anderson from Newcastle. I know he's a natural number 8, but he's somebody who can step into that number 10 role and provide not near the level of production of Morgan Gibbs-White, but not have it be like they don't have anybody else who can do that, right? He is able to be able to do that. Like Sam said, they have so many options on the wing. The two guys they started against Brighton, well, they can also start Alanga and Hudson-Odoi, and they can really cause a lot of problems. But the biggest thing for me in this match is, can Nottingham Forest attack Fulham through the middle? Because if you do that, you're going to have a lot of success. They don't have any ball stopping in the middle, especially when you're getting at them in transition. And the other thing about Fulham is, you have to remember this, they can look really good at home. They are awful away from Craven Cottage. Last season, they had a -12 expected goal differential away from there. And they consistently, this season, they've played 2 matches away from there. They had a pretty putrid performance against United to open the season, and then they drew Ipswich in a match that nothing really happened. So I like Forest. I have them, without Morgan Gibbs-White, I have them projected closer to +115. So like Sam said, draw no bet at -143 is a little steep right now. But let's just wait until we get closer to match time, and maybe we can get a better price on Nottingham Forest.
The tricky trees. So up next for us is Wolves and Liverpool. This one at the Molineux. Wolves +650 at home. Liverpool -275. The draw is +450. The Reds have course corrected after that loss to Forest a couple weeks back. Good showing in the Champions League. Then a big win over the weekend in the Premier League as well. Nothing really interesting here for me at all, I don't think. I do think Wolves start to trend in the right direction at some point. I just don't think that you want to do it here, Sam. So you're the only one of us with any sort of lean in this match. So floor is yours.
Yeah, I am somewhat interested. You've got a Liverpool front line where Diaz on the weekend was a real standout, looked really good. Darwin Núñez, his first start under Arne Slot, scored with a brilliant curling effort. And you had Alexis McAllister in behind, so comfortable in possession. He really, really impressed me, always does. Under pressure, doesn't matter, turns on a sixpence. And a couple of really impressive defensive splitting passes on show to boot. And there was one where he's volleyed it into Salah's path, and then Salah went through on goal and it was saved. But yeah, brilliant regardless. Wolves, on the other hand, vacated their weekend fixture with a 3-1 loss and the unwanted position of being rock bottom of the Premier League without a win. So they took a lead versus Villa. Were unlucky not to go 2-0 up in the first half. So it could have ended very differently for Gary O'Neill and Wolves, who faced the Villa team that looked laboured from international duties, both domestically and internationally. But we didn't see one shot from Wolves in the second half. That is not good enough. They've played 6 of the Premier League's top 8 now, so we need to be mindful. Well, this will be 6 of the Premier League's top 8, so we need to be mindful about that. I think it's probably the hardest stretch of opening games to this point, difficulty-wise, in the division. So yes, they are bottom, but it's been tough for them. And now it's time for Liverpool at home. So not ideal. Liverpool on a minus 1.5 Asian line. Yeah, it's okay. I'm not thrilled with it. Goal line at 3.25. Don't really fancy that either. But if you think Liverpool control the game and get this over the line in like a business-like fashion, then and you would be well within your rights to do so, because over the last 15 meetings in the Premier League, Liverpool have beaten Wolves with under 4.5 goals cash-in on 14 of 15 occasions. So that's pretty remarkable. Like, Liverpool have a stranglehold on this fixture. You can get that at minus 116 on Bet365. The concern here is obviously just the sheer amount of minutes in their legs of these Liverpool lads. It's a bit too much. I keep going over it. But that also feeds into the thinking that they won't want this to be a back and forth, and they probably won't keep gunning for Wolves if they're ahead in the game. So Liverpool and under 4.5 goals, it's happened in the last 14 out of 15 head-to-heads at minus 116.
Okay, Ipswich and Villa up next. This one at Ipswich, they are plus 310. Villa odds on minus 120 on the road. The draw is plus 265. I think this thing can develop into a bit of a back and forth, the seesaw, shootout, however you want to say it. Lots of goals. I think most of them come from Villa. I don't think that the minus 120 is a bad price to lump into a parlay, even on the road. So that's what I'm going to do. They're going to be the first leg of a parlay that I'll wrap up with our next and last match we'll talk about. So I like Villa here. I think goals as well. BJ, what do you think here between Aston Villa and Ipswich Town?
I think Ipswich is by far and away the worst team in the Premier League, and it's really not even close right now. There's a lot of people that say that Pep has ruined the game. I'm one of them. And you can see it in this Ipswich side. The reason for that is they're controlling 37% of the ball right now, and they are still trying to build out of the back. You cannot do that when you're holding 37% of the ball. You have to play in transition, and you have to try to counterattack teams. And you see it. They've only created 3.2 expected goals in 5 matches, and half of that came against Southampton. They've done nothing against the good teams. The other problem is they're not, obviously trying to build out of the back against, good defensive teams. They haven't been able to do any of that. They are averaging 6.1 box entries per 90 minutes. For context, last season, Sheffield United, who has categorically been one of the worst Premier League teams we've ever seen, averaged 8.5. So if things continue the way that they are, Ipswich is going to go down as the worst offensive team that maybe we've ever seen in the Premier League. I don't think they have the talent to be able to keep up here with Aston Villa. The other big problem is that when you try to build out of the back, they're just turning the ball over at an alarming rate. Great resource for some stats is Mark Stats. He just updated his site this week, and one of the stats he included was dangerous possession lost in your own final third, which I think is a great stat. Essentially, how many times are you turning it over high? And Ipswich has turned the ball over high at the third highest rate of anybody in the Premier League, and they're only holding 37% of the ball. That is incredibly concerning. The other aspect is how bad they have been defensively. I mean, they just conceded 4 big scoring chances and 2.4 expected goals to Southampton, of all teams. Like, what do you think Aston Villa is going to do? The only justification that you can make for this price is that it's a terrible spot for Aston Villa because they have Bayern Munich coming to their place in the Champions League. That's the only argument you can make, because Ipswich has categorically been the worst team in the Premier League, and they cannot hang with these good teams. Their defensive setup, their 4-2-4 mid-block or whatever it is, it looks just as bad as West Ham. Teams just play through the middle all the time against them. So what do you think Aston Villa is going to do? So I think that this price is really short. Aston Villa this summer made a conscious effort to bring in depth pieces. So even if they want to rotate their squad and start Ross Barkley and Johan Duran, like, they're still going to be a very good team. So I think this price is way too short. I love Aston Villa at minus 120. I think they should be closer to minus 165, minus 170.
Yeah, I'm with you, Sam. Anything here on Villa and Ipswich?
More of a lean than anything, Michael. At the weekend, John Duran came on and lit a flame at Villa Park. And when he came on and they got the first goal, the eventual scoreline almost felt inevitable, as did him getting on the score sheet. He hasn't started a game yet, averaging 26 minutes per 90 in the Premier League. And I'm just wondering if they can find a way to shoehorn him into the team. But if they can't, I feel that's fine. And the reason I bring this up, because I feel that the depth in the latter stages of this game, Villa's depth, will really hurt Ipswich. Wolves couldn't cope, as BJ said. I can't see Ipswich coping. I think Villa end up getting the win, but Villa will be jaded. It's not a good spot for them. They're now playing Champions League football. They've, a lot of minute in the legs. I keep repeating myself almost every game. Ipswich are rested. They were very fortunate to get a last-minute equaliser at St. Mary's, which Russell Martin will be devastated by. The perfect deflection, kind of curled into the postage stamp in like slow motion. Horrible to concede. Ipswich conceded 2.49 XG away in Southampton. So if you're tuning into your first piece of Premier League content this season on the pod, then let me tell you that is not good. But they did stump up 1.69 XG themselves, so probably should have seen a few more goals than the 1-1 we got. I think Aston Villa win. I think there are goals in the game, but I do think Ipswich have enough to score at home against this Villa side. So you can take Aston Villa and both teams to score at a bit of a bigger price of plus 175.
All right, we'll wrap up the Premier League with Bournemouth and Southampton, a South Coast derby, with Bournemouth as minus 155 favorites, Saints at plus 390 on the road, the draw is plus 320. I do think that Bournemouth should have their way here, maybe be able to name it against Southampton, so I like them as a leg of a parlay with Villa. Pays out just better than 2-1. So I do think both these teams take care of business pretty matter-of-factly. This is a Monday night football game, so it does feel like the Premier League has been skint on giving us Monday nights and Friday afternoon kicks, but here's one for us to sink our teeth into, and
European football,
all three of us.
Yeah, too much.
Yeah, it's just too much soccer. I don't disagree, but all three of us are looking to would start our work week off with a play on Bournemouth here, BJ. So you're also on the cherries.
Yeah, I mean, about as good of a matchup as you can ask for if you're Bournemouth, right? They're the best pressing team in the Premier League right now. They're forcing the most high turnovers in the They have a really low pass per defensive action. And now they're going to face a Southampton team that, by the way, Southampton, they're controlling almost 60% of the ball. And their offensive numbers against bad defensive teams have been okay. But again, trying to build up through Bournemouth's press, this is just an absolute recipe for disaster. Now, as far as the price is concerned, this is pretty high for Bournemouth, if we're just being honest here, right? I would love to get, I would love to have Bournemouth more around minus 135, minus 130-ish. So I would play some alts on Bournemouth because I think that the opportunity they have here, with how many times I believe that they're going to turn Southampton over and create those easy transition opportunities, I think that they could win this thing by 2, 3, maybe even 4 goals. I think this thing could just get completely out of hand for Southampton because they're not going to change under Russell Martin. He's still going to have them building out of the back and trying to play short passes, which is, I'll say, a death sentence when you're facing Bournemouth. You just watch. I know they didn't have a good performance against Liverpool, but the match before that, Chelsea came to Bournemouth and tried to do that, and they weren't able to really do anything. And Bournemouth created a lot of easy transition opportunities off of it. So Bournemouth's obviously been really good at home ever since Areola took over as well. So this is a really good spot for Bournemouth. So I like the -1 at around plus 120.
Yeah, apologies if I just kind of rinse and repeat what BJ said word for word. They were inches from opening the scoring at Anfield.
Yeah.
From, I think it was Semenyo chasing Kelleher down, which might give us a bit of an inkling of what we're going to see on the weekend. Bournemouth took 19 shots at Anfield, mustered over 1.0 XG. They deserved to lose, but they gave a really, really good account of themselves. They are used to performing well and creating chances against Premier League opposition. Southampton are not. They did so against Ipswich on the weekend, nearly 2.5 XG, but the jury is out whether Ipswich are at a level of a genuine Premier League level opposition. This should play out in front of us on Monday night, but all afternoon if you're in the US, and I'm not sure whether Southampton will be able to cope with what Bournemouth will throw at them in forward areas. Their press is aggressive, it's targeted, and it makes life hell for even the best Premier League sides. We saw that at Anfield on occasion, which they nearly profited from. And it's going to sound like we're banging the same drum when it comes to Southampton approach. We've said it a few times now, but if the aim here is to build from the back, knock the ball around, attempt to find a man in space to exploit, and then break the press to progress against this Bournemouth side, that would really concern me if I was a Southampton fan. And it should concern Russell Martin, but he's not going to change tact. He hasn't to this point, so why would he now? And I can foresee the home side here getting as close to their opponent's goal as possible, running Semenyo, Ivan Nilsson, Kluivert, whoever else into the ground with the aim of working the back line and not allowing a moment's peace for Southampton, picking pockets and ultimately punishing Southampton. So in front of me, I've got Bournemouth minus 0.75 Asian handicap at minus 122. I think that's a pretty good price.
Okay, so all three of us on the cherries in that rivalry matchup. BJ, a quick run through Europe, and then we'll get into some championship before doing our underdog parlay and our favorite bets for the week.
Yep, real quick. Friday afternoon in the Bundesliga, Dortmund, Bochum, both teams scored minus 150. Dortmund's doing a little bit different stuff under Nuri Sahin. They're doing a lot of different build-up structures. The last few games, it's kind of been more of a 2-2-1, which is something we haven't really seen before. And when you do that, as Bruges kind of exploited them, is you can exploit them in wide areas. And Bochum, they are mainly a transition team that likes to hit teams in wide areas. So they definitely have a path to score here, and they did score in both meetings against Dortmund last season. Also, there's the big one this weekend, Bayern Munich, Leverkusen. I'll have a full write-up in the actionnetwork.com and the Action Network app. So if you want to read that, I'll have a pick that everybody's going to hate, but you can read that on Friday or Saturday. Over to Italy, Bologna, draw no bet plus 110 against Atalanta. Atalanta's man-to-man press really isn't doing that well this season. They just kind of got exploited by Cesc Fabregas' Como side, who kind of plays a similar build-up type of structure to that of Bologna. So I think Bologna is in a good opportunity here. And also Vincenzo Italiano at Fiorentina last season beat Atalanta 3 times. So I think it's a good spot for Bologna at home. And then over to Spain, Girona plus a half at Celta Vigo. Horrible spot for Girona, but this price is crazy. Girona, I know they lost a ton of guys, but they still have a positive expected goal differential this season, and that's with playing Atletico and Barcelona. And Celta Vigo, I know they've gotten better, but I mean, come on, we can't be laying even money on against a team that's better than you. That's not how this game works. So yeah, those are my 3 bets across Europe for the weekend.
And look out to the championship, Plymouth Argyle.
Yep,
making their ascent all the way up to 20th.
Friday.
And a big one coming up on Friday. Sam, you could spare a couple thoughts on that matchup and give out any bets you like in the second division here.
Yeah, Plymouth Argyle are coming. No, look, yeah. Obviously, I put up Sunderland a couple of weeks ago to get the better of us, and I really thought they would have, but really good performance. Gone on to West Brom, who top the table at the minute. Another really good performance, lost 1-0. So it'll be interesting to see how Plymouth get on against Luton on Friday night. Before my pick this weekend, I've gone Burnley minus 0.25 Asian handicap at minus 114. So Burnley travel to Oxford, who have won 3 out of 3 home games following promotion to the Championship in the summer. And their approach to the opening stages reminds me a little bit of Plymouth Argyle last year after their promotion. Packed stadiums, genuine excitement, like a real buzz around the stadium, and crucially, consistent positive results. However, this might just be too big of a jump in such a short space of time. Yes, Oxford have beaten Derby, Stoke and Preston at home, and the latter pair have operated in the division for a long time now, but there is a gulf here on the weekend when Burnley make the trip south, and I think it might tell. Burnley actually have outscored their XG by a staggering 8.05, notching 13 goals from 4.95 XG. That's something which will make BJ physically recoil and something you should usually stay clear of, but when you can get the security of half stakes returned on the better side here at -114, something I simply couldn't resist. So Burnley on the Asian line.
And I'll just say this: I have a pick, and if you're somebody who's frustrated by the modern game, if you're tired of watching teams try to build out of the back, and you want to watch some old school football, tune in to Millwall and Preston. Am I right, Sam?
Yes.
On Saturday, because this is going to be 3-5-2 versus 4-4-2. It's going to be who can be better on set pieces, and I think Millwall is a little overpriced here, if we're being honest. I know Preston hasn't been that good to begin the season. Millwall's had, some good underlying numbers and everything, but this one has 0-0 or 1-1 written all over. And that 1-1 was actually the exact score in both meetings last season. So if you want to take some exact score 0-0, exact score 1-1, I don't think that's a bad option here because both teams are going to sit in, and it's who can just counterattack better. I'm not sure either of them are really better than the other. So Preston plus a half for me is the actual bet, and maybe some exact scores 0-0 and 1-1.
I mean, that sounds like a beautiful way to spend a couple of hours. We all miss it. We do. And if Everton fires Dyche, we're going to lose it. So we can't let that happen. They won't. No, we can't take the romance out of the game.
Yeah,
at least
we
one
can.
team. Okay, that brings us to our underdog parlay. Just the 67-1. This one will spit out at BJ. You can go first.
Newcastle plus 425. Kick this thing off 7:30 a.m. Eastern time on Saturday. Pretty good spot here for Newcastle. They have the ability to hit City where they're vulnerable. A lot of times when City is trying to build up and they're trying to overload teams in the central parts of the pitch, they leave themselves vulnerable in transition. And that happened last season at St. James Park where Ishak and Gordon got into 2v2 situations and they scored 2 goals off of it. Newcastle's been playing out of a 4-5-1. They've been much better at being compact in that type of structure and not allowing space in between the lines. So I think Newcastle definitely has a path here to win at home where they have been so good since the beginning of the 2022-23 season. They have a plus 1.2 expected goal differential per 90 minutes. So I like Newcastle at St. James Park at plus 425.
I'm going to go with Brighton. I do think it's a pretty tough week to find underdogs in the Premier League. This has definitely been the toughest of the bunch, I think, and actually that going back to last year too. I can't really remember a slate where the underdogs just looked as unappealing as this. I would have went Newcastle if BJ left it. I think Brighton would be my second choice. I wouldn't have been able to have a third choice, and this Brighton one is even pushing it a bit. But we are looking to we'll always have do our best to get this section onto the show. I do think Brighton are within a shot. They are live against Chelsea. Maybe the market's a little too high on the Blues after it looks like they've kind of course corrected, but we've seen this act from Chelsea before. They do have a habit of kind of lulling us in and then pulling the rug out from under us. And I think this Brighton team is dangerous against anybody in the Premier League. So they are talented. They're well coached, exciting group that can beat anybody on any given weekend. So I'll back the Seagulls on the road against Chelsea at plus 330. Sam.
Yeah, tough week for an underdog. I just can't shake that West Ham performance of the weekend against Chelsea from my mind. Like, it was so poor. Each goal conceded was as poor as the last 2 or 3 passes was enough to evade West Ham's press and spring a counter, and Chelsea were through on goal. And I couldn't really believe how easy it was for Chelsea, in all honesty. And West Ham cannot afford to turn up like that again here. Brentford are handy in transition in terms of counter-attacking and turning the ball over quickly and progressing through the thirds. It's not too outlandish to say that the home side will likely work some joy against the West Ham side that looks some way from sparking into life under Lopetegui. And they've also got a midweek EFL Cup tie to navigate at Anfield first, which is not ideal preparation. So I've gone for Brentford winning over 2.5 goals at plus 200.
So with that, same game parlay wrapped in with us. It's, like I said, 67-1. On to the best bets now. Sam, you can go first.
Yes, so I've got... Can I use handicaps here? Is that allowed?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Okay, so I've gone for Bournemouth and Bournemouth minus 0.75 Asian handicap. Concerned for Southampton. This Bournemouth side will harass and harry, especially at home. And if Southampton are not careful, they'll get their pockets pinched via a high targeted press near their own 18-yard box. Russell Martin will likely instruct his Southampton side to get their foot on the ball, work out from the back, and attempt to beat any oncoming press, as they've always done under current management. That might be easier said than done against Bournemouth. I see Iraola getting one up on Russell Martin on Monday night, potentially through a forced defensive error or two. So for me, Bournemouth are the best Premier League bet of the weekend, I think.
I like Brentford at plus 120. I do think that they shouldn't have too much of an issue, as Sam just noted. Against the West Ham defense, I like the money line. I think you can absolutely play some alts here, too, if you want to chase some big prices to have some fun. But I think that they have an absolute chance to run rampant against this West Ham D that none of us are believing has improvement around the corner. All right, BJ, last one for the show.
Aston Villa minus 120 on the road against Ipswich. Ipswich offensively has been terrible. And the reason for that is because they're still trying to build out of the back despite only holding 37% of the possession. So far, they are only averaging 6 box entries per 90 minutes. For context, last season, Sheffield United, who was categorically the worst team in the Premier League, averaged 8.5. So if things continue, Ipswich is going to go down as one of the worst offensive teams we've ever seen. Also, they've only created 3.2 expected goals, and half of that came against Southampton last weekend. So this is not really that good of a matchup for them. And their defense, whether they're playing out of their mid-block, they're allowing teams to just play through them whenever they want. And Aston Villa is a really good build-up team, and a team this summer that made a conscious effort to get a lot of depth into their squad. So even though this is a bad spot, because they have Bayern Munich on deck in the Champions League, I think the price is way, way too low here for against Ipswich, who I think is the worst team in the Premier League right now.
Okay, that does it for another episode of Wondergoal. Thank you again for listening, rating, reviewing, subscribing if you've done that. Thank you to our producer, Noah. We'll be back on Monday morning to do some more Champions League stuff. Maybe we hit a couple more of these 0-0s out of the park. Probably not. And then, again, next Thursday for Premier League preview before another international break. So for BJ and Sam, I'm Michael. Thank you and good luck.